The measurement was accepted, filed, and used for decades, even though one line in the network would not resolve. In the June 1929 survey ledger, a brass transit and rod are logged at Monument 54 in Mercer Basin, Humboldt County, Nevada. Angles were repeated, instruments were checked. A second transit produced the same result. Across the playa, the target marker at Monument 58 appeared steady through the scope, yet every reading returned the same fixed deviation. Other sightlines closed within tolerance. This one did not. No obstruction was recorded. No equipment fault was found. The figures were kept. The map was printed without the basin's name. Humboldt County runs north to the Oregon line, broad and largely empty. The basin in question sat west of the Quinn River drainage, 70 miles from the nearest town. Access was limited to deteriorated mining roads that washed out seasonally. No permanent structures existed within 12 miles. Winter temperatures dropped below zero. Summer heat exceeded 100 degrees. Vegetation consisted of sagebrush, saltbush, and sparse bunch grass. Water sources were intermittent alkali seeps. The area supported minimal wildlife. The basin measured approximately 4 miles east to west, 2 miles north to south. Topographic relief was gentle, sloping gradually toward a central playa. Elevation ranged from 4,200 to 4,400 feet. Drainage was internal, with no outlet to adjacent systems. Early cadastral surveys from the 1880s noted the feature, but assigned no official name. Ranching interest was negligible. Mineral claims in surrounding hills were filed and abandoned. The area remained under federal administration without specific designation. By the 1920s, new surveys incorporated triangulation networks extending across northern Nevada. Control monuments were established on ridges overlooking the basin. Survey teams worked in rotating shifts during favorable weather. Documentation from this period exists in multiple archives. The basin appeared on draft maps produced between 1927 and 1931. Cartographic records show it labeled as Mercer Basin, though no corresponding land patent or claim explains the designation. Adjacent features retain generic descriptors. The name appeared consistently across 3 separate survey iterations. June 14, 1929. Transit set at Monument 47. Visibility clear. Temperature 81 degrees at 0600 hours. Commence sighting sequence to Monument 51 across basin floor. Rodman proceeded to station point. Distance measured at 3,200 yards. Terrain offered unobstructed line of sight. Surface conditions firm. Measurements recorded. Closure error within acceptable range. No anomalies noted in angle verification. Team returned to camp by 1300 hours. June 15, 1929. Monument 51 occupied at 5:30 hours. Backsite to Monument. 47 completed without difficulty. Forward sites extended network toward western boundary. Basin floor showed no recent disturbance. Playa surface dry, cracked in standard polygonal pattern. Wind negligible. Air temperature rising steadily through morning. Rodman reported line verification complete. Chain measurements confirmed, notes transcribed, equipment secured before midday heat. June 16, 1929. Rest day. Equipment maintenance. Water resupply from spring 4 miles north. Team condition satisfactory. Reviewed previous day's field work. All computations checked. Draft annotations prepared for cartographic section. No field activity scheduled. June 18, 1929. Resumed work at Monument 51. Extended sightings to southern perimeter. Rodman. Advanced to Monument 54 location. Distance approximately 2,800 yards. Line established across playa margin. Surface conditions consistent with prior observations. Vegetation sparse but typical for elevation and soil type. Return sighting completed. Angle closure acceptable. Rodman noted no issues during traverse. June 19, 1929. Monument 54 occupied at first light. Temperature 63 degrees, sky clear. Minimal thermal distortion expected. Backsite to Monument 51 acquired. Forward line projected to Monument 58 on Eastern Ridge. Rodman proceeded with transit rod. Signal confirmed at 2,100 yards. Measurements logged. Rodman remained at station for reciprocal observation. Signal acquisition delayed. Atmospheric shimmer increased despite early hour. Rodman visible but instrument targeting inconsistent. Extended observation period. Multiple sightings averaged. Closure error exceeded standard tolerance by 14 seconds of arc. Repeat measurement ordered. Rodman repositioned rod. Second set of angles recorded. Discrepancy remained within similar range. Notes flagged for review. No equipment malfunction detected. Rodman reported no physical obstruction or positioning difficulty. June 20th, 1929. Returned to Monument 54 before dawn. Temperature 58 degrees. Atmospheric conditions optimal. Instrument leveled and verified. Repeated full sighting sequence to Monument 58. Rodman confirmed positioning unchanged. Transit reading logged. Error range duplicated. Angular difference consistent with previous day. No correlation to temperature, time, or equipment state. Cross-check against Monument 47 baseline completed. Earlier measurements remained within tolerance. Discrepancy isolated to Monument 54 to Monument 58 line. Notified section chief by runner. Awaiting instruction regarding network adjustment or monument relocation. June 22, 1929. Section chief arrived from main camp. Reviewed fieldwork, documentation and instrument calibration records. No procedural fault identified. Monument 58 physically inspected. Brass cap secure, positioning verified against original placement notes. No ground movement or settling detected. Chief observed sighting sequence personally. Confirmed angular discrepancy. Measurements repeated using backup transit. Results identical. Decision. Accept measurements as recorded. Network adjustment calculations to accommodate variance. Monument 54 to Monument 58, line annotated in survey ledger. No field correction attempted. Additional notation made regarding playa surface observations. Rodman reported occasional visual distortion, low on horizon during late morning hours, described as lateral wavering uncharacteristic of standard heat shimmer. No physical cause identified. Weather records showed no unusual barometric or temperature gradients. Observation attributed to localized ground conditions. No further investigation conducted. Team relocated to Ifol. Northern section June 24th. Revised maps issued in 1934 retained all control monuments from the 1929 survey. Triangulation points appeared in identical positions. Elevation data remained unchanged. The coordinate network showed no adjustments. The basin label was absent. No annotation explained the omission. No errata sheet accompanied distribution. Survey documents archived separately retained the original designation in field notes, but not in published cartographic products. Subsequent editions followed the revised format. The basin continued to appear topographically, rendered in standard contour intervals. The name did not return. Monuments 47, 51, 54, and 58 remained referenced in geodetic publications through the 1940s. Their positions anchored later surveys across the region. The measurements from June 1929 were incorporated without modification. Administrative records from the surveying office contain no correspondence regarding the label change. Requisition logs show no second survey team dispatched to the area. Budget documents reflect standard operational expenses for the period. The basin exists on current topographic maps as unnamed terrain. Control monuments are no longer maintained. Access roads have degraded further. The area sees occasional off-road traffic, but no sustained use. Archive materials include field notebooks, instrument logs, and computation sheets. The entries remain legible. The angular discrepancy noted in June 1929 was never resolved in supplementary documentation. No explanation was provided for the cartographic revision. Field records from subsequent decades contain no reference to visual anomalies in the basin. Survey operations continued across Humboldt County through the 1930s and 1940s. Teams worked in adjacent quadrangles using identical equipment and methods. No comparable measurement errors were documented. A 1937 reconnaissance party passed through the area en route to mineral assessments in the Bilk Creek Mountains. Their route crossed the basin's northern margin. The expedition log notes terrain conditions and water availability, but includes no observational irregularities. Aerial photography became standard for topographic mapping in the late 1940s. Coverage of northern Nevada expanded through the 1950s. Photographs of the basin area exist in National Archives collections. Image quality is consistent with surrounding terrain. No photographic distortions or processing errors are noted in technical reviews. Geodetic surveys in 1956 reoccupied Monument 47 as part of a regional datum. Adjustment: the original brass cap remained in place. Coordinates were refined using electronic distance measurement. No field notes mention earlier angular discrepancies or unusual conditions. Monument 58 was not reoccupied. Its position was calculated from updated control networks. The 1929 measurements were accepted without modification. No resurvey of the Monument 54 to Monument 58 line was conducted. Administrative transitions in federal land management produced routine documentation gaps. Survey offices relocated. Personnel retired without comprehensive knowledge transfer. Field notebooks from remote operations were cataloged inconsistently. Cartographic revisions often removed unofficial place names to standardize nomenclature. Editorial decisions were made by drafting sections with limited access to original field context. Name removals typically occurred without formal review protocols. The absence of a revision note aligns with standard practices of the period. Errata: sheets were issued for coordinate corrections or elevation adjustments. Label changes were considered editorial rather than technical and did not require separate documentation. Thermal inversions over playa surfaces can produce optical effects that distort angular measurements. Localized temperature gradients bend light paths, creating apparent displacement of distant targets. Such conditions are difficult to predict and may occur despite clear skies. Survey instruments in the 1920s lacked compensatory mechanisms for atmospheric refraction. Operators relied on optimal timing and repeated observations to minimize error. Persistent discrepancies could result from unrecognized environmental factors rather than instrument failure. The decision to accept measurements despite known error reflects practical constraints. Resurvey operations required significant time and resources. If physical monuments were verified and equipment checked, procedural tolerance allowed incorporation of marginally imperfect data into larger networks. Rodman observations of lateral wavering low on the horizon are consistent with mirage phenomena. Desert environments frequently produce such effects, particularly over flat, reflective surfaces. The description does not indicate anomalous conditions outside normal atmospheric optics. The specific wording used in the June 22nd entry, uncharacteristic of standard heat shimmer, suggests the observer distinguish between familiar distortion and something less typical. However, subjective assessments of optical phenomena vary widely. No quantitative measurements were recorded. Localized ground conditions could include variations in surface albedo, soil moisture, or mineral composition that alter thermal emission patterns. Such factors are transient and difficult to document retrospectively. Survey teams operated under tight schedules, dictated by weather windows and funding cycles. Extended investigation of minor anomalies was not standard procedure. The decision to relocate on June 24th indicates adherence to planned workflow rather than avoidance. Cartographic editing practices in the early 1930s prioritized clarity and consistency. Unofficial names without legal basis were removed to prevent confusion in land administration. The absence of a corresponding patent or claim for Mercer Basin would have flagged the label for editorial review. Draft maps circulated among field offices, regional administrators, and Washington bureaus. Any of these entities could have recommended removal. Correspondence tracking such recommendations was not systematically preserved. The retention of control monuments while removing the basin name suggests technical data remained valid while descriptive elements were revised. This separation of geodetic and cartographic information was standard practice. Maps from surrounding areas show similar patterns. Labels appear on early drafts and disappear from later editions without full explanation. The phenomenon was widespread enough to be considered routine rather than exceptional. One detail resists straightforward explanation. The angular discrepancy recorded on June 19th and 20th was isolated to a single sightline. Cross-checks against the monument, 47 baseline showed earlier measurements remained within acceptable tolerance. The error did not propagate through the network. If atmospheric conditions over the playa caused optical distortion, the effect should have been observable across multiple sightlines originating from Monument 54. Sightings to Monument 51, completed without difficulty on June 18th, crossed similar terrain at comparable distances. The Monument 54 to Monument 58 line was the only one affected. Refraction errors typically correlate with temperature gradients, time of day, or atmospheric pressure. The discrepancy persisted across multiple observation sessions conducted at different times under varying thermal conditions. Repeatability suggests a consistent rather than transient cause. Equipment malfunction was ruled out through calibration checks and use of a backup transit. Both instruments produced identical results. Physical inspection of Monument 58 confirmed stable positioning. No procedural errors were identified. The observation of lateral wavering, described as distinct from typical heat shimmer, was noted only in relation to this specific location. No comparable effects were reported during the remainder of the survey or in subsequent operations across similar terrain. If localized ground conditions produced unusual thermal patterns, those conditions left no lasting trace. Later, aerial photography shows standard playa morphology. Soil surveys from the 1960s identify compositions consistent with regional norms. The measurements were accepted. The network was completed. The data was used for decades without revision. But the discrepancy was never explained. Mercer Basin appears on 3 separate draft maps between 1927 and 1931. Each iteration was produced independently using field notes from different survey teams. The label's consistency across multiple sources suggests it was not a transcription error. No record identifies the origin of the name. Land patents in Humboldt County from the 1880s through the 1930s contain no reference to Mercer as a claimant, landowner, or surveyor. Census records and local histories provide no corresponding figure. The name may have been colloquial, used informally by early prospectors or ranchers, and adopted by survey teams without formal verification. Such names occasionally entered draft documents before editorial review removed them for lack of official standing. The 1934 revision eliminated the label but retained all associated technical data. The basin's topographic representation remained unchanged. Its boundaries, elevations, and drainage characteristics were rendered identically to earlier editions. Control monuments that defined the survey network around the basin continued to anchor geodetic work through the 1940s. Their coordinates appear in reference tables and technical publications. The Monument 54 to Monument 58 line, despite its noted angular error, was incorporated into regional frameworks without adjustment. Archived field notebooks from June 1929 remain accessible. The entries are legible. Computation sheets show work performed to standard procedures. No supplementary notes address the cartographic revision. Administrative files from the surveying office contain budget reports, personnel assignments, and equipment inventories. Correspondence regarding map production is limited to routine distribution and printing logistics. No internal memos discuss the basin label or its removal. The basin remains unnamed on current maps. The monuments are no longer maintained. The surveys are complete, but the archive remains open. If you'd like to explore similar records, subscribe for the next video.